Stay tuned to the end of this episode to a word to our patrons.
She's one of a million baby ones. She's the black one with 1,000 young.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Let's Take FGO Wanted, the show where we let you know if you want to roll that 5-star. It's been a little bit, but it's the spooky season again, which means we've got a spooky skeleton wanted for you to check out as we engage in ancient conspiracies with Jacques de Molay, a new 5-star foreigner, limited. So, as with our regularly scheduled wanted programming, buckle up for real-life history and folklore, fate lore, capital letters, mechanics, and more, and try not to get got this Friday the 13th. So, we begin at the beginning of my script. Anyway, Jacques de Molay was the last Grand Master of the Knights Templar, serving in that position from 1292 until 1312, when Pope Clement dissolved the order. The Knights Templar, whose full title was Poor Fellow Soldiers, which is hyphenated, by the way, of Christ and of the Temple of Solomon. You can see why we shortened that one. Were a militant order of Catholic Knights. They were founded in 1119. They were originally based around the Temple Mount in Jerusalem. So they were one of the several militant orders involved in the Crusades and serving various functions there. In addition to their well-known military might, at their peak having over 1,000 commanders and forts in the Holy Land, they were also a very popular charity after they were officially endorsed by Pope Innocent II, and were also one of the first forms of banking in Christendom. This means that they could also be regarded as one of the first multinational corporations in history. They were an international entity who were not necessarily bound to local rulers and engaged in commerce and business. This level of power and prestige didn't fully last, however, as they were pushed out of the Holy Land during the natural course of the Crusades. Their influence was reduced, and they were made to chafe with some of the nobility back in Europe as they resettled, again, because of this whole beholden only to the Pope thing. And they accrued some rumors of secrecy, corruption, even criminal activity. Now, prior to being raised as the Grand Master position, not much is known about Jacques. Presumably he was born somewhere near Molay in Burgundy, which can also be spelled more like Molay. This is currently in France, but at the time would have been in the Holy Roman Empire. Best guess, he was born somewhere around 1245, though the exact date isn't known. Records do claim that he was knighted around age 21 and that he died at approximately age 70, so we have some backwards working we can go from there, but obviously the records are not pristine. Jacques became the Grand Master in Cyprus in 1292, as mentioned earlier. Did this after proposing some internal reforms as kind of a contrast to the current Grand Master, and when that Grand Master in due time died, because being Grand Master was a position for life. He took that position. Jacques spent most of his time as the Grand Master of the Order trying to muster support for a new crusade, and being denied, though he did perform some raids and scouting against the Mamelukes during this time period. Several years later, in 1306, Jacques, along with the leader of the Knights Hospitalier, were invited to speak with the Pope, who was currently based in France, about the prospect of a new crusade, issues of merging their orders, and other various concerns. This is why he was going to France, as you'll see later. During this time, King Philip IV of France, who was apparently historically known as the Fair, we'll see how that one works out for him, wished to have both of those militant orders under himself, but Molay was opposed to this because Philip was a known Pope bullier, so the signs were there. But Molay did go to speak with the Pope to address his own concerns and to speak with the Pope about the rumors of Templar misconduct. While in France, eventually this boiled over, and at dawn, on a fateful Friday the 13th, October, 1307, King Philip IV, who was, by the way, highly in debt to the Templars over a war with England, issued an arrest warrant for the Knights Templar on charges of fraud, corruption, idolatry, and general heresy. General consensus, both now and even historically, is that these charges were complete bunk. All confessions to them were gained under torture, but Philip IV bullied Pope Clement V, who, as I said earlier, was based in France at the time, and others into disbanding the order and asking other monarchs to arrest Templars and seize their assets. This wasn't universal, by the way. Templars were welcomed in Portugal, for instance, but generally it was a bad sign for the order. Jacques de Molay did confess to heresy under torture. He was in his 60s at this time, but when released after the disbanding and stuff, he recanted his confession as obviously fake, but Philip wasn't going to take any chances for due process and had him and others declared relapsed heretics. Jacques de Molay was burned at the stake on the 18th of March, 1314, at the approximate age of 70, as we mentioned before, and continued to stand firm at the end. He requested to be burned facing Notre Dame with his hands clasped in prayer, and dropped some Curse of the Mummy shit as he died, saying God knows who is wrong and that calamity would come to those who condemned him. Funny story, Pope Clement died about a month later, long bouts with illness, and Philip IV suffered a stroke while hunting within the same year. So who's laughing now? In general, the vast wealth and influence of the Templars, a major part of the medieval infrastructure, being so suddenly overturned, resulted in a wide variety of myths, urban legends, and pseudo-history over the years, and no doubt contributed to the mythos of Friday the 13th, though it was already seen as unlucky at the time. This, though, did not help anything. The Freemasons sometimes claim to be descended from the Knights Templar, and there are many legends and works of fiction about big famous relics such as the Holy Grail, the Ark of the Covenant, and the Shroud of Turin being among the relics owned by the Knights Templar, which may have been hidden during their downfall. Ooh, you may recall some Da Vinci Code shit here. Additionally, there is a popular historical legend / falsified claim that Jacques conquered Jerusalem in 1300 with the aid of the Mongols. This is because an anonymous historian noted that parts of the Holy Land were held by a Molay, spelled with an A at the end and a U at the front. This was a completely separate Mongol general. They were just confused. I mean, considering that you can spell Molay, which is Molay, as Molay with like an AI, yeah. Not necessarily their fault, but they were two separate people. Jacques was speaking with the Mongols about an alliance during this time period, but never actually led any of their forces or did any conquering during this time period. Didn't stop historians and artists from being confused for a bit. The most important urban legends are related to their alleged heresy and idolatry, however. There were some who claimed that the Templars worshipped a mummified head, which might have actually been a relic of John the Baptist, and an entity known as Baphomet. The name Baphomet appears in several sources of Crusader literature and appears to be a corruption of various names for the Prophet Muhammad, and this name was frequently used in confessions the Templars gave under torture, but their exact nature wasn't consistent. Sometimes they've described a severed head or skull, such as the aforementioned head of John the Baptist, or relics of other saints. Sometimes they described a cat, and sometimes they described a head with 3 faces. Some claimed it was an idol, like an actual statue or construct. Others claimed it was a painted image. And there's basically no actual historical evidence of any idols or symbols actually being found inside Templar holdings. So, if you're trying to build a consistent mythology, guess what? There wasn't one. The depiction of Baphomet as the Sabbatic goat didn't come until the 19th century when, in general, with rise of more occultism and other such thought, there was actual scholarly debate about the fight of the Knights Templar. The generally accepted theory then and now is that the name, like I said, has a similar etymology to the word Mehmet. It's from the Old French for Muhammad, so you would get Muhammad or Muhammad, and then you switch the M to a B sound. And according to Christian theory at the time, the Muslims were seen as idolatrous, worshipping the prophet as an idol and a false god, so there may have been references to the worship of Baphomet in the Templars as kind of like studying the ways of their enemies, but again, no serious actual magical goat stuff yet. That said, during this time in the 19th century, Baphomet was starting to be associated with occult or Gnostic practices. Some Gnostic groups were suppressed around the same time as the Templars. And there were many hoops jumped through to explain how the name is related to occult practices. I will not recall them here. They are terrible. Eliphas Levi is the one who laid out the idea of the Baphomet as the Sabbatic goat, using depictions of goats in medieval witchcraft and the images of the devil as a major arcana in the tarot. He describes Baphomet as a symbol of balance and ideal order being made of opposing halves, male and female, human and animal, good and evil, etc. This was a huge influence on the occultism of Aleister Crowley, and the sigil of Baphomet is one of the signs used by modern Satanism. Additionally, during this occult period, Baphomet was syncretized with Pan and with some depictions of ram-headed Egyptian gods as well. So, moving on to our lore, Fate immediately throws us a curveball in that it actually has multiple depictions of Jacques de Molay in the franchise already. The first one we meet is a male saber in FGO Arcade, which is a separate world line from regular FGO. And then the female foreigner we see is depicted in FGO Mobile, and that was later. Also, male Jacques was a cameo in Requiem first, even. So, the saber Jacques we see is a representation of the historical facts as we understand them now. He is a holy warrior and a reformer, aiming to uphold the 200-year legacy of his order. Even his visual design is very simple and consistent with actual historical depictions we have of Molay from the time period, as you can see from this public domain image you are seeing right now. The female Jacques we see, then, is an innocent monster-type servant, one who has had their Saint Graph and abilities altered by historical perception. She embodies the myths, urban legends, and accusations around the Knights Templar that were applied to them then and even sometimes now back and forth with various forms of fiction and pseudo-history, like I said. This means that she is associated with Baphomet, with the legend of Friday the 13th, with stories and legends of powerful relics like the Shroud of Turin, and with the stories of hidden initiation rituals and occult knowledge. But wait, there's more. Being a foreigner, the mobile version's Jacques is associated with an outer god, one of those evil gods of the abyss who exist outside our universe you hear about occasionally, that we can't seem to let go because we got at least one Thulu head on the writing staff. Now, specifically, Jacques is linked to an entity described as the Holy Mother of the Abyss. While not explicitly name-dropped, this is a thing FGO actually does often. They just use epithets and don't say the weird names, probably because they'd be even harder to write in Japanese pronunciation. Anyway, this bears a close resemblance to Shub-Niggurath, also sometimes spelled Shio-Luganoth, or many other variations. Lovecraft himself wasn't very consistent about spelling or pronunciation. Anyway, in the Lovecraftian canon, she is described as the All-Mother, the Lord of the Wood, and the Black Goat of the Woods with 1,000 young. In mythos, like in fiction, Shub is pretty implicitly compared to the likes of Astarte, the Magna Mater, Cybele, Pan, Echidna, etc. This description of the Black Goat of the Woods also matches up with some folklore related to the Basque peoples, known as, I assume this is how it's pronounced, Ackerbelts? It's got a Z in it. Which is a black billy goat which commands elves and other mystical beings, and also very obviously fits the description applied to the occult Baphomet way later. Now, Shub occupies a very interesting place in the mythos. Despite being described as female, she's also depicted as a nebulous cloud containing ever-shifting amounts of tentacles and hooved limbs, though, being a being from beyond time and space, gender's always a little confusing. She is the mother of 1,000 young, though, notably her dark young, which are basically like Ents from, Tolkien or D&D, but with more tentacles and bigger mouths and less singing and poetry. As befitting being a mother, Shub is described as having several mates or husbands. She may be considered married to Hastur, Yog-Sothoth, or even Yig, father of serpents. Canonicity is not something we're known for here. Interestingly, Shub is usually portrayed as one of the least malicious of the Outer Gods normally. While she is indeed a being beyond our ken, her interest in the concept of growth and fertility means generally she's not out to control or extinguish humanity, just that her gifts or her attention in the form of strength, fertility, and health may come with mutations or deformations, which mean you won't be blending in with modern society, like getting turned into a satyr, a cannibal satyr. In Out of Aeons, an actual Lovecraft story, the text even says that Shub would take humanity's side over more malevolent entities like, oh boy, I've never had to say this name out loud before, Gantonotha? Nathoa? A lot of extra vowels in there. Anyway, this stuff gets tacked onto our foreigner Jacques because of urban legends, and again, the fact that the mythos of the Black Goat of the Woods is very similar to the Baphomet mythos, which I would like to remind you was entirely made up in the 19th century. Anyway, Saber Jacques was a major story character in Arcade's version of Singularity 6, which was actually Jerusalem, not Camelot. He also appeared in Arcade's version of the Summer Abbey event, which was tied to the Dreamlands, and may not be the last we see of him. Put a pin in that one. Foreigner Jacques will obviously be a major character in the new Halloween event, the Queen of Dust and the Disciple of Darkness. Spoiler, she's the Disciple of Darkness. She will also be appearing later in the Lilith Harlot event, that's the Arcade crossover, so buckle up for that one. So, time for the mechanical, nitty, and or gritty. Jacques is an SSR, 5-star foreigner, holding fairly low attack for that slot, but the highest HP of foreigners to date. She is quick arts buster, with higher hit counts and NP gain to make up for that particular spread. She has 5 hit quick cards normally, and 4 hit buster cards, so you're going to see some star gen on that as well. Her NP is a quick AoE, which is very straightforward. It just hits enemies for 1,000 1k curse damage for 5 turns, and a plus 100% curse damage for 5 turns, so it's 2k total, just on her own. And its overcharge effect is a very simple NP damage buff, which applies first, starting at 20%. Her first skill does fall into our Charisma species. It's a 10 to 20% attack up for everybody for 3 turns, and also a 20 to 30% crit up for that time. But it's also a 10 to 20% NP battery up for everybody, and makes everybody but her on the squad evil for 3 turns. Gains them the evil alignment for 3 turns specifically. Second skill gives herself 1 full turn of invul, is another 20 to 30% battery for herself, meaning she has the full 50. And allies who are evil, that's other allies, get 1/1 of invul, so 1 hit, 1 turn. The final skill is her version of Innocent Monster. It gives her 5 to 10 stars per turn and a 10 to 20% quick up for 3 turns, but also gives her a 30 to 50% damage buff versus cursed enemies for 3 turns. This will also get a rank up later. This means that she will do a curse on her normal attacks before the attack hits for 500 damage for 3 turns also. That is, both the curse and the buff are for 3 turns. Passives are Existence A for debuff resist and then a little bit of stars per turn. Territory Creation A, so her arts card is very good, and Divinity B for that damage plus. So, Jacques is pretty straightforward as a servant, and could even possibly be argued to be a bit underperforming, though her rank up will help with that by giving her a way outside of NP hits to apply her bonus damage. But basically, she's an off-support and wave clearer. She has a lot of team-wide buffs, and has an AoE NP, but can also do some damage herself. With her quick focus and her other skills, she can generate plenty of stars, she can give allies critical damage up, and can provide them with hard defenses and manipulate alignment, which can be very useful. You will probably be using her NP first as the lead-off to clear ads and curse bosses for follow-up turns. If you're farming, this kind of follow-up isn't important, but it is something to keep in mind with probably how her strategy works best. Don't think her damage will slouch too hard, though. I know that her attack is low for her slot, but do recall she basically has all the flavors of damage increasing effects. She has attack up, crit up, quick up, NP damage up, a trait bonus damage, and a damage plus from her divinity. All of those are more multiplicative than additive, so you will do a shocking amount of damage when you actually get going. This means there's a few primo support options to put her on a team with. Ashia Doman is the first and most obvious ones. He also has evil-focused buffs for extra attack and crit, which is something Jacques de Molay also does. Though, keep in mind, Molay is neutral evil, so she doesn't double up. She doesn't get the chaotic bonus as well. Doman can also hit enemies with curse on skill for Jacques to proc her bonus damage as well. And his NP also does curse and evil curse for 3 turns, so you will get that dot stacking pretty high. His is also, I believe, 100%, and his default damage is like 2k, so you are going to actually do a lot of curse damage. Van Gogh also has some interesting interplay with curse. Mostly she wants to curse herself or her allies, but she can turn curse stacks on enemies into a positive. And more importantly, she is also chaotic evil herself and has some gnarly debuffs for enemies, like a defense down and a quick res down, which will add even further to, Jacques' damage output. And she could give further buffs to allies' critical damage and attack, including, by the way, a Existence Outside the Domain style buff, which applies to Jacques, because she's also a foreigner. If you're trying to further amplify quick or crit damage on Jacques specifically, you've got old standbys like Scotty and her upcoming summer variant, which will play well. Keep in mind, Jacques has 2 buster cards, don't forget. If you're looking for an actual, attacker to focus on, any single target unit which can take advantage of this sort of thing works, though. I don't think there's a really good single target attacker who will take advantage of the types of specific buffs that Jacques throws out. It'll just be her non-specific buffs, like attack and crit up. Now, for CEs, you have a few choices as usual. Jacques will hit 50% battery on herself with skills, so 50% starting CE can help. Obviously, there's Golden Sumo, or Halloween Princess, which will be in the shop for this upcoming event she's debuting in. Get that MP damage up. You can also go for some more quick-leaning ones, like Cherry Icicle, Crimson Spear Trainer, One Summer, etc. This is useful for farming and the like. If you're looking for a long haul and don't want to just, immediately blow your load to wipe a wave, consider amplifying quick NP damage or critical damage in general to make her perform better. Also, keep your eyes peeled for the CE Method to Walk on the Stars. This was just released in JP and the Wangina World Tour, but it's basically a free Jacques buff. It's a 50% starting battery, and at MLB is 25% bonus damage versus cursed enemies. It's kind of like the Jacques version of Honey Lake, that one CE that goes really well with Consort Yang. So yeah, keep that shit in mind. Also, mechanically, Jacques will be a bonus servant in this Halloween and the next Halloween, and presumably in whatever upcoming Halloween event JP is probably brewing. We'll find out soon. So, moving on to other stuff. Materials-wise, Jacques as a foreigner is pretty simple, though she does call for in-demand items, such as bones, chains, eggs, and comet shards for ascension and skills. But the sheer volume you will need of those is a little lower, and you don't need to worry about statues or skill gems. Now, this may actually surprise you, but Molay actually has gotten quite a few banners. She's going to be at this initial Halloween Rising event we're about to do. She will get a rerun banner during Halloween Rebellion next year. She will be on the equivalent of the 25 million downloads banner, which is between then and now. And also has a banner during Lilum Harlot, the FGO Arcade collab. Obviously, there's, first of all, 7 banners during that time. I legitimately think there's actually like 5 of them, literally. And there'll be like several brand new servants to worry about. But it still happens, you know? Additionally, she is a limited SSR, so she will be available in some form in all future Lucky Bag GSSR campaigns. And that's really all I've got. If there's anything else I say at the end of the video, I've fucking forgot it, because I gotta wrap this up video and go do Fail Betrayal. Check out our live streams. Also, if you're curious, the song that I played in the intro is Six Gun Gordon Dynamo by The Darkest of the Hillside Thickets. You can find it on YouTube. That's everything I got. Ciao. If you like this video, be sure to give it a like. If you have any comments, leave in the comments section down below. If you want to also please subscribe to our channel for more Wanteds, and also to check out our regular podcast, Let's Talk FGO, every week. Even if you're already subbed, make sure you ring the bell so you know when I post Wanted videos at like midnight, and also other things we post. You can also join our channel memberships and support us on Patreon. You could have gotten this video early. And speaking of our patrons, before we go, shout out to all of our patrons, but especially Adam DeHarp, Blacksta G, Call Me Zed, Carlos, Dragon, Fias Icebird, Jeremy Vasquez, JDV9000, Just the Fae, Johnny Sandoval, Chris Starlight, Legendary Boss Hunter, Liam Kessler, Regent Raptor, Rise of Kenji, Rogue Robin, Charvor, Sean Pryor, Some Guy Named Bob, and Varen the Crow. If you like what you want to see some more, consider joining us on Patreon.